They're not adults choosing to stick out their insane amount of billable hours as a lawyer. Like they're still kids. There's a difference in all these things. So like I said, just check in with them, have a really honest conversation, give them an out, say, hey, if you want to back off, I'm happy to do this. We just want to make sure you're happy. And coaches, I think this is a good time to poll your kids as well. Is this too much? Do we need to make practices a little more fun? I've talked about this in other videos. The best coaches will read the room and sometimes be like, hey, you know what? We're not going to have this intense practice today. We're going to have a fun one. We're going to play horse, or we're going to play fungo golf if you're in baseball. Like, we're going to have pitcher's BP later. Like, we're just going to have a fun, silly day. And this can be really rejuvenating and life-giving. And so just make sure that if kids are having fun, they will work hard, and they will go to the ends of the earth for their sport and for their team.
You are listening to the Bridging Impact Podcast, transforming leaders on and off the court with host Coach Furtado. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm thrilled to have on our guest today, Dan Blewett. Dan is a coach, athlete, and author, former professional baseball player. He's got a great YouTube channel, great content for baseball athletes, but also more importantly for coaches and parents of all sports. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, let's dive right in. How has the game of baseball made an impact on your life?
It's been my whole life since I was, 8 when I really jumped in. And I don't know, it stuck with me. I had sort of like the right demeanor for it. I had the hand-eye coordination. And I think, more than anything, I just really loved the actions of it. So for whatever reason, it just, I love to throw. It's like a kind of integral part of who I am. And my body's good at swinging bats and throwing balls. I produce force rotationally really well. All athletes are different. And I just loved it, just the randomness, being able to play in the backyard as a kid. So I just had a really fun childhood, doing all that. And then as I got into more competitive baseball, I just really wanted to see how good I could be and keep competing against better players. And I enjoyed the pressure and the adrenaline and all that stuff. So, it's been a long journey from age 8. I retired at 31. So I got a lot of baseball. And of course, I play a little slow pitch softball now as an adult. I've just started into that. And that's been fun in a way I didn't expect. But, it's taught me a lot about resilience and hard work and, the importance of, just getting something done every day. And it's definitely shaped more than anything else, like who I am today.
I love that, and I definitely share a similar experience. I played basketball and baseball growing up. I was actually better at baseball and kind of have similar experiences with you, going to camps during the summer. There for me, it was it's called Crabs Camp. So we had like a semi-professional team, summer ball team, and that used to always be, so much fun and just falling in love with the game. And, as you kind of transition to a coach, and I'm sure you've had the opportunity to reflect back, were there any, coaches that you had, whether it be Little League, Babe Ruth, high school, that really helped you fall in love with the game?
I don't retain as many memories from my childhood. My first coach, his name's John, he was definitely a big influence. And, he taught me the basics and was, I think, really encouraging. And also at times, like, a little in awe at my talent, which I remember. There was a time in high school where he said, I was going to go out for freshman football. And he said, if you get hurt playing football and you can't play on the USA Olympic baseball team because of it, he said, I'll never speak to you again. But, he was joking, of course, but like he always had something flattering to say that made me feel like I could be something bigger than I was, and you always internalize little things like that, I think, as a kid, about when, people you look up to and respect, think a lot of you. And sometimes you don't know, and so I think he was always vocal enough about that. And of course, he said that I was one of his only players that didn't cry on the field. So he said I always had the demeanor for it, which I appreciate hearing that as an adult, because, Sports are tough, and I think there's definitely a place to cry. I even made a YouTube video about this. Like, I think crying is a healthy thing for people to do. Do you need to cry when you strike out? I don't think so. So there's
Right.
a lot of life lessons you learn, and that was one of them. Now, as I got older, I had many coaches uh, that were very important, and really just like when I hit a fork in the road, there always seemed to be a new mentor or coach who had like the right sort of tool, and I've kind of called them like my lantern keepers in my books, that when I didn't know how to get to kind of like the next level, they seemed to just sort of appear out of the fog and help me with whatever it was that I needed. Sometimes it was a coach being super tough on me and making me tougher. Other times it was someone being patient with me and being kind of kind. It just depended, but I always was really lucky that I had coaches pop up when I needed them.
That's really cool, and it's great to hear that you had those coaches and mentors that influenced you in your journey. And you mentioned something about talking about like resilience, and I know I want to dive into that. However, I would love to kind of talk about how some of those coaches have shaped how you coach today, whether it be your coach from the very beginning teaching you the fundamentals, or talking about flattery and giving you compliments, and how that's helped you transition into, kind of becoming the coach who you are today.
Yeah, I think it's important that you see a mix of coaching styles. If you've only had authoritarian drill sergeant style coaches in your life, that's probably how you're going to be more so as a coach. For me, I've had all different types. So I can draw on different experiences and say, maybe this kid needs a little more of a gentle message. Maybe this kid needs a little more of a tough message. And there's always a mix of both with me. I'm not actively coaching a team now. Obviously, I dispense, my coaching advice on YouTube and various other platforms now. But for my baseball academy, I did thousands of lessons and thousands of hours of coaching and strength training. I was a strength coach and I was the head of my organization and would roam to different teams, and was also head coach to at least one or sometimes like one and a half or two teams a year. And it really just depended. Like something like I read this in Coach K's book, Mike Krzyzewski, and I think it was his book, or actually it might have been Coach Wooten from was he UCLA?
Yeah, he's UCLA. Yeah,
and he talked about how everyone's. His analogy is great, and of course this is a testament to how good of a coach he was. But he talked about how on his basketball team he would get kids who came from silver spoon wealthy upbringings, and he would get kids from Compton, like in the ghetto. And he said everyone's life is a bowl of whipped cream or it's a bowl of crap. And he said his job as a coach was for the kids who came from a life that was pretty much crap, was to whip a lot of whipped cream into it. And he was kinder and gentler to those kids and showed them that they took extra time to make sure they knew that he really cared about them. And the kids that were all whipped cream came from these really wealthy upbringings. He tried to whip a lot of crap into their bowl. And I think that's a really apt analogy, because some kids, they really do come from like, hey, maybe mom or dad are really tough on them at home or whatever, they have a rough life off the field. And this is their place where they just really need like positivity and they really need encouragement because they don't get that elsewhere. And so you try to pick up on that. And then other times it's the opposite, and they have too much fluff and they're soft and they need to get chewed out sometimes, and there's a lot of good coaching info out there on the web. And I think it always just boils down to that. It just depends, for me, helping kids understand that we can't explain every little thing to you when you want to know the answer. I know that's a big thing with the younger generations of kids like Gen Z and the younger generation. I don't think they have a name yet. I think they're thinking of calling them polars. But these young kids, they want everything explained to them. They want it very gentle. They want to know the why behind everything. And I understand the desire for that. But as a coach, if I've got 2 hours with a team and I've got 15 kids, I'm sorry, but I don't have time to explain everything to you. And sometimes it's just like, do this, get it done. And if you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you. And fortunately, that prepares you for later on, because as you get up the ranks in sports, if that's what you want to do as an athlete, if you want to play really competitive, high level, whatever, there's going to be less and less like, hey, little Timmy, let's talk about this moment. It's fast paced, it's, you've got to understand and try to internalize things as you can. And so I think kids need to still learn that lesson when they're young, that sometimes it's just jump when I say jump. And sometimes you're good enough wasn't good enough. And you might need to get yelled at for it. Sometimes coach screaming that you need to focus is maybe the right thing. Now, you never want to be degrading or call a kid stupid or do anything like that as a coach, but sometimes they need a wake up call. That was the wrong play, and it. You got to focus better than that, right? So being firm is not the same as being critical, and being critical is not the same as being degrading or offensive or mean as a coach, right? And I think those are tougher things to pull apart for today's younger generation and parents, where I've had a lot of times when I've been like yelled at or chewed out as a kid, and I didn't go home and cry about it. Like, never made me feel good, but it also made me feel, hey, I need to, like, if this is what I want to do and play at this level, I need to think on my feet a little faster.
100%. No, I believe that that's really important. And I think that's a common theme that I've heard in almost every single podcast interview I've had with coaches is knowing your players, right? Knowing whether they need to have the bull whipped up with a little bit more crap, or if they need a little bit more positive reinforcement, because we get the opportunity to learn more about our players. And it all isn't always going to make sense, so to speak, for them at this time, right? If it's, hey, we're going to jump and we're going to do it right now. Well, I don't have time, like you said, right? Like, even for me, I have 90 minutes, right, after school practices for my high school team. That's not a ton of time. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
always going to have time to kind of break it all down. And, maybe I stay a couple minutes after practice if someone really has a question. I could answer that. However, I think just teaching them these life lessons of, this is what it's going to be like, and being firm with them is just so crucial and important for their development.
Yeah, and it's when parents, I think they know that character building is a good side effect that you get from enrolling your kid in sports. It's not the point of sports, and I get irritated when I see that on Twitter, on the web, where people are like, oh, the reason you play sports is to build character. It's like, no, that's just a happy side effect. You play sports because you
Right.
like it, because it's fun. It's a thing to do that distracts you. It's no different than playing the banjo or painting or playing the piano or doing whatever, right? It's just something you do for enjoyment. And if you want to play a really competitive level, it's still the same thing. You're just trying to see how good you can be and whether you can hang with better players. And really, so like the character development is a happy side effect, but it's misguided when parents want to intervene and, like, you know don't be so tough on my kid, or make sure you're really gentle with them, or they don't want to see their kids come home upset. It's like, this is going to prepare them for the real world. They haven't been, again, I'm never going to call a kid stupid. I'm never going to like take personal shots at them, but sometimes it might be, you better get in line. Like, you better focus. That wasn't good enough, stuff like that. And that might make them feel sad or disappointed or ashamed or whatever in themselves. But that's going to prepare them for the real world, where if you give a terrible presentation at a board meeting or something, no one's going to like be happy with you. And you've got to say, you know what, I really screwed up. I got to do better. Or I did my best and it wasn't very good, and I've got to do better anyway. So I think it's a misguided thing, and I just want parents to realize that sports are a really good, safe environment for your kids to fail in, to get yelled at in, to all these different things. I think I'm not advocating for coaches yelling at them, but the reality is, if you let your kid play sports for 10 years from 8 to 18, they're going to get a myriad different coaches with different coaching styles, and will certainly get some jerk who's a coach at least once or twice, one season or another. And that's a good thing for them. It's not going to be great for that summer or that winter, but they're going to learn a lot of, like, oh, this is how you deal with someone who's maybe not as kind as they could be, or not as patient, or they're just like a little tougher. And that prepares them for that bad boss they're going to have one day, or that really tough professor who, if your college professor is not nice to you, no one cares. There's nothing's going to change. Or you show up to college basketball or college football and the coach is really tough on you, mommy and daddy aren't going to step in. It doesn't matter. So I just think it's good to remember that, good or bad, tougher or really gentle, the coach that your kid has today is gonna shape them in a positive way if you can keep that in mind. and help your kid understand the mindset. Like, hey, this isn't fair. Coach is playing his son over you or her daughter over you, and there's a lot of nepotism going on, and this is definitely not a fair situation, but we're going to deal with it the best we can. And what mindset can you have, and how can you make the best of this year? And hopefully we have a better season next year. That's all good real world stuff to keep in mind, because especially with the unfairness, that's where I think a lot of people get really wound up. And I'm sure you've seen this, like everyone wants their fair share every single season. And it's like, life is never fair at any time, you know? And again, I think it's a good safe place to have those early experiences of just how unfair life can be.
And I love the question that you ask, how can we make the best of it? Instead of like, okay, let's quit and let's go to another program right now. No, let's finish this season out and how can we make the best of it? And I think, basketball is not an equal opportunities game, neither is baseball. The best shooters, the best scorers are going to shoot the most shots. The best hitters are going to hit at the top of the lineup and get more ABs because they're at the top of the lineup. And it shouldn't always be equal playing time. I think that's such an important lesson for people to have. And, I know we want to, and I'm not a parent, right? So I don't have like that, kind of direct experience, but we're doing our kids a disservice if we protect them from feeling any sort of pain or any sort of, disappointment, right? Like I think a lot of times, like I have a couple of kids who I cut from the team this past year who worked so hard because they were so disappointed last year that they're going to end up, especially one of them is going to end up being really good this year because they just took that to heart and were like, okay, I'm not getting cut again. Right. And so having those experiences and being able to, give kids failure and, like you're not good enough to play, or you're not good enough to shoot a couple times a game, or you're going to bat 9 for us, or whatever it ends up being. Like those are really important life skills. So I'd love for you to kind of continue to expand on this notion of fairness and also like responding to failure.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So, yeah, gotcha. Yeah. I mean, and one of my seasons, I felt the sting of this when I was like 27, 28. I had just gotten Tommy John surgery, which is a major elbow surgery for the second time after my third season, missed the next year coming back, and then got a chance and had a kind of up and down year. I started for a little while, was a reliever for a while, was a spot starter for a while, which if you're not a baseball person, that just means you occasionally start when they need you to start. Like you're not in the regular starting rotation, but if they're, say you have a double header, they might need Dan to go start that game, and then you're back as a reliever, which is really hard because you kind of get out of your routine and you don't know how to prepare, that kind of stuff. But so that season I finished with like a 4 ERA, which is it's average for a starter. It's a little below average for a reliever, which I'd say, more considered a reliever at the end. And I didn't know if I was going to get invited back to that team the next season. And so in the off season, they did offer me a contract back. And when I showed up for the next year, I was basically getting like the mop up innings. So again, that's like I'm pitching the 6th inning, as a reliever, or I'm pitching multiple innings if the starter doesn't go very well. I'm basically one of the relief pitchers who's going to mop up, quote unquote, the least desirable innings when the game's not on the line. It's 7-1 in the 6th, or it's a blowout and it's 6-0 after the second. I might go in, and that's not where you want to be. You want to be pitching in the last 2 or 3 innings, being the closer, the setup man who pitches the 8th inning when you're ahead, or like the 7th inning guy. Those are like your best 3 relievers pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th, essentially. And I got back and I'm like, man, I think I'm better than this. I think this kind of sucks. Like I'm pitching mop up to start the year. And then I just like sat with it for a little while, and it stung, only because I knew I didn't earn something better, but I knew that I was better than that. And I feel like I came into spring training and I looked really sharp, but they were going off last year's numbers. Like last year's that's essentially the role that I had earned. So yeah, it stung and I sat with it for a little while. And then I just said to myself, you know what? If I just pitch really well, they're going to give me better chances. So I just focused on what I could control, which was how well am I going to pitch tonight? And I ended up having a career year that year. I ended up just rocketing up our depth chart in the bullpen because I allowed like 3 earned runs the whole first half of the season. I had like a sub 1 ERA, was voted to the All-Star team for the second time in my career. and I was pitching the eighth inning, like by a month into the season, because I was just, every time I went out, bam, Dan was dominant. Dan goes in, strikes out two hitters, gets his three outs, goes in, strikes out a hitter, gets his three outs. That's who I was. So after just a couple weeks, everyone's like, man, tight spot. Let's bring Dan in. Okay. Dan comes in, dominates. Great. Happens again. Tight spot. 1-run game. Let's bring Dan in. He's been sharp. And it just kept being like that. So you always have a chance. If you have a jersey, if you have a spot on the team, you always have a chance to climb up the rankings and earn the playing time that you want. And it's just a matter of having the right mindset. And again, I knew I was better than what I was getting. I just had to go out and prove it on a day-to-day basis. And I knew if I did that, then my team would want me there in the tough spot. They wouldn't want to waste me in the sixth inning in a blowout if I was pitching lights out. They would want me in that tight game. And that's what ended up happening. So, you learn those lessons throughout your career, and you never stop feeling bad when you're sitting on the bench. You never stop feeling bad when you have a mediocre role with your team. If you're like the sixth man, or you're just not getting a lot of minutes or whatever it is, you never feel good about that. You always just have one way to respond to another. You can sulk and complain and, oh, I'm better than that guy, I should get better than that. I didn't really care who was better than me at that moment. I just wanted to pitch as best as I could, because I knew if I pitched really well, I would start to rise up the rankings. Because when I pitched lights out, no one else really had the stuff that I had. So that was what I focused on. And, young kids especially, that's what they want to learn. And you only learn that when adults stop holding your hands too. When you as a parent say, you know what, if you don't like it, work harder, play better. I'm not going to go talk to your coach about your playing time. You want to play more? I want to see you in the backyard, spend another half hour on that hoop. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. But if you do, then you might actually get what you want.
100%. Yeah, I talk about that all the time, especially, I feel like pitching and basketball may be a little bit different in terms of, only 5 people play at a time for basketball. So what I say is you have to earn, right, your game spot, and then you keep your play time by how you play in a game, right? That's earned. Coaches want to win at pretty much every level. And so we're going to play the players that give us the best chance of winning, especially, the higher levels, high school basketball, college, beyond, right? And so, if you earn that trust by how you play. And so that's just so important for athletes to learn, that you're not given play time, right? You're given a chance in practice to show that you are worth it, whether, for you, maybe bullpen sessions, if you're in high school, right? Oh, his stuff looks pretty good, or whichever sport it is, right? You have to show that you are good enough to earn that play time. And I'm curious, how did you, kind of talk to yourself in response to like a bad pitching outing where you maybe gave up a couple of different runs, and how do we continue to encourage athletes to respond after a bad game?
Yeah, there's two different things here. One of it is, especially with baseball, which is a highly luck-based game. There's a lot of skill. The better you are, the more, your hit goes through the infield instead of, being caught. The harder you hit the ball, the more they go for hits. The sharper you are as a pitcher, the harder you throw, the sharper you're breaking stuff, the more those bad pitches don't get hit, whatever. But baseball is a very luck-based game. So there's part of that process is, don't assume that every time you have a bad game, it's because of things in your control. So don't think you have to overhaul your swing or your mechanics every time you play. Generalize that for all sports. Some days you're just going to feel a little off on the basketball court. You're not going to be 100% every day. One of my coaches, he told me to kind of break the way he would break down his starts. He was a starting pitcher. He said, think of it in groups of 4. If you go out there every 4 times you pitch, 2 times or 1 time, you're going to have your best stuff and it's going to be really easy. You're going to win that one every time. 1 time, you're going to have your worst stuff. You're not going to feel good. Nothing is going to work well. You're going to lose that one. So now you've got 1 win and 1 loss out of those 4. He said, what really matters is the other 2 times. When you just feel okay, maybe you're like a little fatigued, maybe your fastball's not that good, or your curve, something's not good on all those other 2 days. And the question is, can you grit it out mentally and win those 2 games? If you can, you're a 3-1 pitcher. If you can't, you're a 1-3 pitcher. And he said that's really the difference, is how comfortable you can get when you're not at your best. And that goes with all sports. Some days you're going to feel sluggish. Maybe you didn't eat as much. You feel, your legs are heavy running up and down the basketball court. Can you still focus and take good looks? Can you still get away and like get clean shots off? What is in your control when you don't feel your best? It's really easy to throw down, 20 points when you feel super fresh. You got amazing sleep. School was easy. Everything in life is good in your personal life. You're focused. It's easy to like play your best and, drop your 20 points that way. But when things are not going well, maybe your ankle is bugging you, you didn't eat lunch, which you should always eat lunch, make time for that.
Yeah.
But, say you skip a meal, like whatever, there's so many factors. Are you just going to allow yourself to like kind of sleepwalk through the game and not play well? Or are you going to be able to find a way to focus up and, challenge yourself to have the energy to rally? And that's a really important factor with all athletes. And you see this with, the LeBrons and the Michael Jordans and the late Kobe Bryants. Like those guys, you never saw if they were hurting. But when you watch like games like, the documentary like The Last Dance, you realize that Michael Jordan was not the same every night. There were some times when his feet were killing him, his back was killing him, he had some injury or another, or he had tons of stuff going on in his personal life. Yet you would never know it on the court. And that is a skill. That's a mental skill to always seem like you're together. And that's stuff you see in, minor league baseball as well. Most guys come July have some nagging injury, but you would never know it. And they were probably on the bus till 4 a.m. the previous night a lot of times. And I pitched on just like no sleep, and like no one cares. It's not like, oh, attention fans, Dan Blewett is not well rested tonight. Please go easy on him if he blows the lead for you. Like, no one cares. And so those are lessons you learn later on where like no one wants to hear your excuses. Your teammates don't give excuses like that. You don't give excuses like that. It doesn't matter if your girlfriend just broke up with you, if you didn't get a wink of sleep on the bus last night, if your ankle is just really killing you. If you're in the starting lineup and you agree to play, then everyone's like, well, then that's it. No excuses, 100%. So I don't remember what our original question was, but I think some of those things were important. I mean, it really just comes back to accountability. And can you be accountable to yourself? Can you say, no matter how I feel physically, no matter what the circumstances are, I'm going to challenge myself to focus and play my best.
100%. And those are so important to take with you throughout life. And, for me, I woke up at 4:45 a.m., took my girlfriend to the airport. I'm like, I could be tired and sluggish. Dan, forgive me. I'm going to ask some bad questions today. It's like, no, like that's not an excuse. If I'm taking time out of your day to have, you on the podcast, you don't care, right? You want me to be engaged. And I think it's like, there's no excuses when we come to that. And so when we're teaching, our athletes this, do you use, kind of scenarios where, you're kind of preaching to them? Or are you asking them questions? How do you teach that kind of, mindset?
I mean, I think it's addressing it when it comes up. I think you can talk about theoretical things that they're going to face in the future till you're blue in the face, but they don't really sink in that well until they've experienced it. And I think it's just really important as a coach that once they're going through something like that to talk about it. Like as an example, I gave a bunch of little talks at a baseball showcase up in Pennsylvania earlier this year. And it was a lot of high level kids, like 16, 17, 18 years old at this showcase where there were a bunch of college scouts watching. And, it was like a 2 or 3 day event. And the weather was just not great the whole time. It was like unseasonably cold. So it was like, I think it was like early July, but it felt like hoodie weather. And it was just raining off and on, different intensities throughout most of the 3 days. And I talked to the kids about that. I'm like, look, how many of you want to have your big moment in front of scouts while it's pouring rain, right? How many of you? Like, no one wants that. And I used to feel that when I was pitching. It's like, we had 140 game seasons. It's like, it's cold and it's rainy on this Tuesday night. I just hope they don't call me. Like maybe the score will stay so that I don't have to pitch. And that's not a good mindset to be in. You've got to be ready no matter what. And so addressing those moments, like, hey, if it's obviously it's not raining inside, if it's a tennis, if it's well, you don't play tennis indoors until you're probably a lot older, but if it's a basketball game or whatever, you're probably not going to have weather as a factor. But all those other things. Hey, maybe this is the fourth game in a row, and you guys are all tired. Hey, this is a moment where you're going to want to give in at halftime to the fatigue in your legs. You're going to want to slow down. You're going to want to like just jog it up the court. You're not going to want to play defense as much, right? But this is the time, guys, to show what you're made of. And if there's a scout here watching, they want to see how much energy you can summon in the third and fourth quarter of the fourth game of the weekend. That's where they want to see if you're tough or not. They can't make any judgments about the first game of a tournament. When everyone's excited, everyone's rested, they can't make good judgments on players in baseball. When it's like a beautiful sunny day and it's the first game and everyone's healthy and everyone's happy running around, they're going to make their judgments when, like, does this kid still hustle when it's raining and it's the fifth game of the week? The ones who don't, that's where they've really gotten a good look. In all these sports, it's really easy to be mentally tough when stuff's not very hard. It's hard to be mentally tough when conditions are not ideal. For me, that was pitching through a lot of elbow pain. I had more elbow pain than I didn't in my career. Like, being not healthy was typical for me. And that's like where you learn it. You're like, well, my elbow hurts. Well, my elbow's going to hurt, so I'm going to pitch anyway. So how am I going to pitch? Like, I can whine about it. I can make an excuse. And a lot of guys do that. A lot of guys, there were starting pitchers that I pitched with, and it became known. Everyone picked up on it, and that became your reputation. But they're starting pitchers who are good pitchers. But in the fifth inning, they come in, they start like making it known that their shoulder doesn't feel good. That way, if they go out and have a bad sixth inning, then they kind of have an excuse. They're preparing to cover for themselves. And that's not what college coaches want to see. That's not what varsity coaches want to see. And that's not what you want as an athlete anyway. Regardless of the recruiting trail, like, you want to challenge yourself under various conditions, not just when it's easy, And I think that's part of the excitement. Like, the first time you can, have a really great game despite being really fatigued or tired or sleepy or just have had a rough week, and then you have a great game, that's exciting because that shows you that, wow, now the sky's the limit when I actually feel fresh and I feel good. So, yeah, I think as a coach, it's just really making sure you can seize on these opportunities to teach it when, if it's like, if there's some adversity coming into this game, whatever it is, maybe it was a really long drive, maybe it's weather related, maybe it's fatigue related, maybe it's the end of the season, maybe you had a bunch of really bad losses and guys, their morale, or girls, their morale is down. Those are all the big moments to be like, hey, let's talk about the easy way out today, and the fact that you might stop playing defense or you might stop running as hard as you could down the court because of X, Y, and Z. Those are the big moments, I think, to capitalize on as a coach.
Yeah, 100%. That makes a ton of sense. And using those experiences as opportunities to elevate their game, right? And hey, if you think you are injured, then I'm not going to put you in because I don't want to hear any excuses. If your elbow hurts a little bit, your knee's banged up a little bit, that's fine. You're either going to play through it, no excuses, or you can sit out and I will find someone else that wants to play. And I think those are just really important skills. And, actually one of my, a movie I really enjoy is Invictus, the rugby movie. And I remember Morgan Freeman's character and Matt Damon's character. Morgan Freeman's he's the president of South Africa, and then Matt Damon's character is a rugby player on the South African national team, if I'm remembering this correctly. And they're kind of talking, and Matt Damon's character was like, yeah, I'm a little bit injured, but, I'll be all right. And, the president at the time said the same thing. And I just remember like that, kind of connection of being like, oh, like obviously, a president of the United States, doesn't matter what your political party, it doesn't matter what he's feeling that day or she's feeling, they have to go out and, kind of lead the country or, lead the team. And so it's the same as a coach, the same as an athlete. And so I know you kind of mentioned a little bit on the scouting side. And so as we enter the ninth inning of our conversation, I'd love for you to talk about, what advice do you typically give to players when they want to continue to make that next level, whether that be varsity or college baseball or professional baseball?
Yeah, you figure out a lot of the demands every time you go up a level. So for me, when I first got to pro ball, I didn't know how to conduct myself. Not the sense that I was like partying or doing anything crazy, because I wasn't. But like, I don't know, like, what does it look like to warm up like a pro now? Like, once I knew kind of what I did in college, but like, I'm in the pro game. Is it different? What does pregame look like? What are the routines that guys go through? So every time you go up a level as a young athlete, whether it's making your JV team or your varsity team, look at the players who've already been there. See how they conduct themselves. See what they do in pregame. What are the routines? Where the warm-ups? Ask around. Like, don't be afraid to ask someone. And then just really be a good observer, and not just your own teammates, but the other players on other teams. Like, how do they go through their warm-ups? How do they go through their pregames? All that stuff. You're always looking for breadcrumbs that you can pick up and little clues that you can pick up that are going to help you figure out the demands of the new level that you've been brought up to. And of course, every level, you're then going to have someone else looking down, whether it's the varsity coach at the JV level or college coaches coming out to watch or pro scouts, whatever. You need to be, number one, on your best behavior. Obviously, with social media and all that stuff, like it's the Wild West of ways you can get yourself crossed off someone's list, because there's a lot of kids that want to play college sports, doesn't matter what sport you play. And the easiest thing is just don't give them a reason to cross you off their list by tweeting something stupid. In general, it's best just like to not live your life so much on the web. You don't need to make all your opinions known. The fewer polarizing opinions you have to present to the world, the better off you're going to be. You can have these opinions in silent, keep them to yourself. You can have conversations with the real world, but don't feel like you need to tweet out things to impress someone on the internet, no matter what's going on. It's better just to stay, I'm not going to engage in politics while I'm, trying to get recruited to play college volleyball or whatever it is. And the other thing is just like show up on time, get good grades. Like, obviously the grades aspect is huge. If you want to play a college sport, there are standards that you have to maintain to be recruited, to pass the clearinghouse stuff and to stay on the team. So if you're not a good student, it's not going to work out for you long-term as a student athlete either. And so then beyond that, you have to start to go to college basketball game, go to a college volleyball game, see what the athletes look like, see how they're built. Because if you are, 5'7" and 120 pounds, and you go out to watch, say, a D1 women's volleyball game, and you see all these girls are 5'11" and 165, and they look very strong and fit and muscular. Well, you say, well, I got to fit myself into that box. So maybe I need to get in the weight room and fill out my frame and get stronger and all that stuff. Figure out what the demands are. Go experience these sports. And a lot of times you can talk to the players after the game or before the game and get an idea of like what you need to be to play at that level. That's important. And it's inspiring to go do that. You see, wow, you go out and see a soccer player and look at their skills and say, okay, I need to go work on my agility. I need to go run a little more. I need to go work on my top sprint speed and figure out what I can do to get to that level. So I think parents and coaches should be taking field trips to watch college sports in real life as much as they possibly can. Go watch the varsity team, as much as you possibly can if you're not there yet. And then at that point, it's figuring out what does it take. And this is where you ask a coach, say, hey, I want to play in college. Can you give me an honest assessment of where I'm at now and what are the stepping stones to get there? It's pretty rare that kids ask you that, but when they do, it's impactful, because now you can, as a coach, say, okay, you're too small. I know you think you're really fast, but you need to get faster. You're just not fast enough to play at that level. Like, you're doing okay here, but in the grand scheme of things, you're a little bit slow-footed. And you got to work on your jump shot, or your field goal your free throw percentage has got to go up. It can't be, whatever percentage it is now. It's got to go up if you want to play at that level. And they can really help you hone these little aspects of your game. And this is something that I advocate all the time. Like, ask around for a really honest audit of your skills. If you're a parent and you want to help your kid, pay for an hour of a coach's time, someone that you really trust, and be like, I want you to be brutally honest with us, not unkind, but be really honest with us. Tell us what we need to do if we want to work on the problems and our flaws and our deficiencies right now to get to where we want to go. And those conversations always sting a little bit, where someone's like, yeah, you got to get to here and you're only here. You got to get to here and you're only here. But that's the only way for you to make forward progress long-term, is to get the feedback you need and, to start chipping away towards it. Make an action plan. Okay, I got to put on 20 pounds before my junior year when coaches are really going to come watch me. How can I do that? I've got 18 months, right? What kind of supplements should I take? Or how can I pack more food to take to school? Where are my calories at now? Okay, I'm eating 3,000. Can I eat 4,500 calories a day? That'll make a big difference. I'm doing 2 workouts a week. Can I do 3 or 4? Whatever it is. But these are all very step-by-step. You can make an action plan pretty simply if you know what you're looking at and what your deficiencies are. But a lot of times people just don't want to hear it. They're too afraid of getting that feedback, and they don't really want the honesty. They want the puffery. They want to be, okay, you're doing great. You're doing great. Well, it's like if you hear from everyone that you're doing great, and then guess what? As a senior, you're not getting recruited. Someone was lying to you, right? Or they didn't care enough to understand your goals, or you didn't advocate for yourself and your goals enough. And now everyone said, yo, you're great, you're great, you're great, until you're just not good enough to go to the next level. And maybe you could have been working on something. And sometimes, and Coach, I'm sure you know this too, is that sometimes multiple sports is a problem at the high school level, right? Playing multiple sports at like ages 14 and below is great. It really helps you find the sport that fits you best. But if you're in high school and you're playing 3 sports, if you're able to make three teams, a lot of times it holds you back if you're not like a superstar athlete, right? If you're not an Aaron Judge or someone like that who can just play 3 sports and go D1 in any of them. If you're on the fringe to play in college any single sport, then at the high school level, you probably have to pare down and say, you know what, I really want to play college basketball. So I don't know that I can give away my whole summer playing football. I really need that time to, have another half season or whatever, or really get in the weight room and put on some weight and get stronger and work on my jump shot, whatever it is, so that I'm really prepared for the next winter. And those are serious conversations that specializing in a sport does become really important, especially by sophomore year. And at that point, you just have to ask yourself, do I want to keep playing multiple sports in high school? And if I do, because I just love it to death and I want to be with my friends and I just would rather do that and accept the consequences, that's totally fine. But if you're like, I definitely want to play college basketball and I will do whatever it takes to do that, sometimes that means, cutting down one sport at some point, just so you can be more specialized and train more of that. If you get 12 months of basketball a year, it's going to potentially run you into some overuse injuries. Like we all know that. If you're running up and down the court, it's tough on your knees. 12 months out of the year, you get a rest if you're playing a different sport. But your jump shot's not going to get better playing golf, and your jump shot's not going to get better playing soccer, right? So it just comes down to what buckets need to be filled. I used to have this conversation with baseball players where they just definitely want to play college baseball. I'm like, well, you need to put on weight, and you're going to lose all your weight playing basketball all winter. I know you love basketball and you can keep playing it if it makes you happy. But if you really want to play college baseball, you've got to put on 15 pounds this winter. And if you're sprinting up and down the court for 4 or 5 months in a row, it's not going to happen. So these are the pros and cons of playing this other sport. What do you want to do? So we've had that conversation a lot of times, and kids make either decision as their life. And that's a good thing for them to make personally. But as you start to get closer to recruiting time, just figuring out what do you want to do? Who do you need to be? And can you get some honest feedback to help you make an action plan to get there?
Right. That honest feedback is so crucial. And I think also kind of going above and beyond on that is just watching, like you said at the beginning when you were talking about, hey, what does it look like, right, for a college athlete? Like you said, do I need to bulk up? And so, understanding what it takes, finding someone who will give you the honest truth. And then you have to make that decision, right? Yeah. Because if you really want to play college sports, you have to make sacrifices. And I know that I didn't play college sports, but, one of my best friends who I grew up playing baseball with did, and it was a job. It became his life, right? So it's like, is that something that you're willing to do? Mm-hmm. And I think, those are such good questions to ask. And, we could probably talk about this all day, but the final question I'll ask you is just, what final kind of thoughts and advice would you have for the coaches and parents that are listening to this, that want to have the greatest amount of impact on their athletes?
I would just say check in with your kids more often. I don't think a lot of parents do this from my experience. And again, I ran an organization where we had, 6 baseball teams, 3 softball teams, and I worked with a lot of kids. And I just got the impression that parents kind of had an idea of what their kid wanted and didn't necessarily check in to see if that changed over the years. And I think it's easy to be like, oh, my son wants to he wants to play D1 sports, so we're going full bore at that. Well, if you start going full bore because they say that at 12, well, that might change at 14 or 15 or 16. And if you're still like pushing, it can really suck the joy out of it. And believe me, sports today are much less joyful than they used to be because kids are doing strength training earlier, practices are always run by adults. Everything is much more rigid and organized, and they don't get to play as much. Like I played in the backyard every day until I was like 13. And then I think sports started getting a little more organized after that. But I just had so much autonomy that it was always for me. And then when adults were like, all right, we're going to organize all your stuff now because you're playing at a high level of youth baseball. It's like, okay, I'm good with that. Like, I feel like I got my time doing it myself, and I'd still go in the backyard all the time, with my dad or myself or whatever. So I think parents, make sure you're checking in with your kid and really asking, like, how do you feel about all this? Is this too much this week? Can you really handle 4 strength training sessions? Can you really handle 3 practices and 4 strength training sessions and your mental skills coach or this and that and tutoring? It's like, it's just a lot. And I think checking in and being like, look, honey, if this is too much, it's okay to say, I want to do less. Like, it doesn't make you less committed. It doesn't make, like, ultimately sports need to be for your own happiness. And if you're miserable and it's just getting to become a lot of kids quit when they get to college. Or if you're miserable because it's so rigorous, or not even just miserable, if you're just getting tired because you're doing so much of your sport in high school, you're going to start to want to just have more freedom in college, and maybe earning that D1 label or that college label, like, oh, I made it to play college soccer. Then you're probably like, you know what? I don't even want to do this. I just want to have freedom and like go out with my friends and like go to a party on Friday night and like get my schoolwork done. But I don't want to have 6 a.m. practices again. I've been doing that since I was 13, So parents, if you are on this really rigorous travel schedule, no matter what their sport is, and coaches too, just try to check in and make sure that they're still having fun. Because if they're not having fun, it doesn't matter what their goals are, they will eventually quit, like, for sure. I had so much fun as a kid that I was willing to endure multiple elbow injuries and then multiple elbow surgeries. I had a lot of rehab. I was on the bench for like 4.5 years combined out of my career. And I was willing to endure that because I just loved it so much. And it's really a lot like a marriage or a relationship. If it's hard from the beginning, it's not going to last. It's got to have that really easy, like, we really get each other. We really love being with each other. And then when stuff gets introduced, like a job is stressful, you have a kid, you do all these other things, and life just becomes harder, you still stick that out and try to solve those problems because you know how happy you two have been together, right? You know what you both do to each other. And so that's how it needs to be in sports. Like, your kid has to love it so much that they're going to be willing to like withstand the brutal high school coach or the brutal training hours, but only for so long because they're still kids, right? They're not adults choosing to stick out their insane amount of billable hours as a lawyer, like, they're still kids. There's a difference in all these things. So like I said, just check in with them, have a really honest conversation, give them an out, say, hey, if you want to back off, I'm happy to do this. We just want to make sure you're happy. And coaches, I think this is a good time to poll your kids as well. Is this too much? Do we need to make practices a little more fun? I've talked about this in other videos. The best coaches will read the room and sometimes be like, hey, you know what? We're not going to have this intense practice today. We're going to have a fun one. We're going to play horse, or we're going to play fungo golf if you're in baseball. Like, we're going to have pitcher's BP later. Like, we're just going to have a fun, silly day. And this can be really rejuvenating and life-giving. And so just make sure that if kids are having fun, they will work hard and they will go to the ends of the earth for their sport and for their team and for their coaches. If they're not having fun, it's not going to end well for anyone. It's not going to end the way that anyone wants it to end.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I don't want to speak for you, but I know the reason that I love sports so much and is the reason that I am doing what I am doing today, interviewing coaches like yourself and still have my basketball training business because I love it so much and I want to give that back. And, that's an opportunity that, I'm forever thankful and grateful for. So, where can people find and listen and watch some of your content? I know you got a lot of great stuff, not just for baseball players, but for all athletes and parents and coaches.
Yeah, my YouTube, I'm easy to find. I'm Dan Blewett on the web. So if you Google me, Blewett, even if you spell it wrong, Google will suggest the correct spelling.
Nice.
But, my books are on Amazon. I have 2 books on Audible if you're more of a listener. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Like I said, I'm easy to find. And I'm not all baseball, but I definitely have a heavy slant to baseball. But if you want to tune in for a lot of the mental skills stuff, the parenting stuff, the coaching content, the best places for that are definitely YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dan. I got a ton of notes, and I'm excited to bring back my learnings to my families and coaches and athletes I get to work with.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate you.
For listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.